Ryan, why don't you speak a little bit more about the conditions in Gaza? Because I think that's something that a lot of people in this country probably don't understand. Like, what are the conditions in Gaza that people are forced to live under? Like you said, Aaron, in the most densely populated area, one of the most densely populated areas in the world.
Yeah. In 2012, I think the UN released a report that said that Gaza would be unlivable by 2020. And it's 2021 now,
Right.
and there's a global pandemic too. And, Israel's withholding and blocking vaccines from getting into Gaza. It's a horrible, horrible situation, that alone. And now it's carpet bombing civilian neighborhoods. 70% of Palestinians in Gaza are refugees. Over 50% are children under the age of 18. I think 98% or maybe even more of the water is undrinkable.
Wow.
And it's
No drinking.
it's a horrific reality that we can't even wrap our heads around, as you were saying before. People get like 4 hours of electricity a day. I've been in touch with my friend who lives there, who has been DMing me saying, he has a 4-month-old baby, and he messages me and says, the residential tower was bombed 10 minutes away from him, and his baby's screaming in the middle of the night. And
scariest shit ever, man.
I just don't think people are being provided with that context by the corporate media, which is why it's so important for people like you, Justin, and you, Aaron, like to blast this shit out and get the truth out there, because for 73 years, the truth has been suppressed. And Palestinians, when they come out and speak about the reality on the ground, they're smeared. Ali went on a German news channel the other day, and today they released a letter or something saying that he's an anti-Semite. So when Palestinians speak up about what is happening, the atrocities that Israel's committing across all of Palestine, not just in Gaza, but in Israel and in the West Bank, people are like silenced. And it's here in the US as well. I think there's 30 anti-BDS laws across the United States, which is egregious. People are intimidated if they do speak out against.
Is that even legal with the First Amendment? Is that even legal to do that?
I don't think it is. And actually, Abby is suing the state of Georgia right now because of this ridiculous law in Georgia. But they, are across the US, they're implementing these types of laws. And it's just, people aren't getting the correct information, because not only is the corporate media suppressing the truth, but Silicon Valley tech companies are suppressing the truth. Last summer, I believe, there was a Palestinian organization that was going to have Laila Khaled, a Palestinian freedom fighter, on to discuss the liberation movement in Palestine. And Zoom removed, and I think YouTube as well, removed that forum. And meanwhile, the Israeli occupation forces are able to have Zoom meetings with the public, and they're able to put these ridiculous pieces of propaganda up on all of these Silicon Valley tech companies on these platforms. And so I just think it's really important that we understand that the truth is actively being suppressed, and that people who are willing to stick their necks out there and stand in solidarity with Palestinians who are living under this horrific colonial system, we need to be screaming from the mountaintops. And especially as Americans who, we're giving $10 million a day to for Israel to perpetrate these atrocities. It's not just in the name. It's not just in the name. Israel's not just claiming to be committing these war crimes in the name of like Jewish people around the world, but they're also doing this with money. We're about to pay our taxes here in the US, right? $3.8 billion this year alone will go to Israel to accelerate its colonial project. And I just think that people need to understand how high the stakes are, and that if we don't speak up, who will? Obviously, Palestinians will be the ones to liberate Palestine, but people in the in the U.S. have a role, and that's why I really admire what both of you guys are doing.
No, I admire what you're doing as well, and go ahead, Aaron, if you want to add something.
Well, I just just talking about how sadistic Israeli U.S. policy is towards Gaza. There, you can give a million examples. So the water, that's a result of deliberate policy. Sabotaging, bombing Gaza's sewage plants, its water system, preventing Gaza's fishermen from even fishing their own waters and actually killing them if they stray too far in their boats.
War crime, right?
Constant war crimes. And there was even in 2012, it emerged something just so typical of Israel. This advisor to the Israeli government named Dov Weisglass, who was the advisor to Ehud Olmert, who was the Israeli prime minister at the time, at the sort of liberal end of the Israeli political spectrum, even though in reality they're all right-wing fanatics. But he said that there was a deliberate Israeli policy to, quote, put Palestinians in Gaza on, quote, a diet. So what Israel did is they calculated the amount of calories that citizens of Gaza would need to basically not die of hunger, keep them alive and have them not die of hunger, but just the bare amount. And based on that is they use those calculations to then decide how much food they were going to let into the Gaza Strip. So let these people live on a, quote, diet, just enough so that they don't die of hunger, but that they still suffer. That's the Israeli mentality that rules Gaza.
And I should also say that we've seen these horrifying videos of, Israeli bombs flattening residential buildings, flattening towers where media companies are based out of, and those buildings will not be rebuilt because of this genocidal blockade. The rubble will stay. It looks like the buildings that were bombed like a couple years ago are still in ruins, and this is what the policy does. People are being carpet bombed, and then they can't rebuild their homes, they can't rebuild their neighborhoods. So,
and what does that mean for, just the housing situation, right? Like, it's already the most densely populated place, and now that whole apartment buildings that house hundreds of people are just gone now. So what is the next step that people even can do to have a place to be housed?
Well, they have nowhere to go. They can't leave Gaza. Israel doesn't let anybody leave. It's literally a prison. You can't leave it even if you wanted to. Some people get out on student visas, but the amount of the population that can actually leave is a tiny fraction. Look, there's a great film called Killing Gaza made by Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen. I recommend it. And they interview people who've lost their homes, and you see where they're living now. They're living in ruins and in tunnels. It's people pack into, I imagine all the people who've lost their homes now, if they know someone, they'll pack into another house that's already filled with people. It's a ghetto. It's really, the closest analog I can think of is the Jewish ghettos under Nazi Germany. Just people deprived of all the means they need to survive.
It's interesting you brought that up, because I don't know if y'all saw it, but there was videos that were coming out of a Palestinian or an Arabic ice cream shop that was being completely destroyed. Yeah. And the first thought in my mind was like Kristallnacht, right? Like, that's what first came to my mind. And it's crazy that, and you can speak to this more, Aaron. I don't know if you had family living in Germany during the Holocaust or whatnot, but to see that now being turned and flipped around and done to another people by, the state that was created as a result of the Holocaust, like, is just incredibly gross. And it's almost like a de-evolution, right? A de-evolutionary state. Like, what does that trigger in you, like, kind of emotionally, seeing something like that happen, which, happened to people like your ancestors back in the 40s in Nazi Germany. Like, how does that hit you emotionally?
Yeah, well, you know, in my case, my great grandparents were shipped off to Auschwitz and murdered. My grandparents survived. My father was born as an infant. He was born, and then a month or two later, the Nazis invaded Hungary, and so he lived the first year of his life under Nazi occupation. And he only survived because he was smuggled out of the Jewish ghetto in Budapest to a family friend who was living away from there, who was not Jewish, and so that's how he survived. And so, you know, look, you can imagine the anger I feel when a government that claims to speak in the name of Jewish people is now acting like Nazis. There should be no shying away from that comparison. It's the tactics and the attitude of a Nazi state. This idea of it's a Jewish supremacist state. Everyone knows that now. There's even a party in the Israeli parliament called Jewish Power. Right? Imagine if we had a party here in government called White Power or Christian Power. You know, it's called Jewish Power. That's what Israel has become, and it's been this way for a long time. You know, this isn't some new phenomenon, but it's just so out in the open now. You can't hide it anymore. And yeah, those images. You know, there was that video too of these Jews dancing outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest places in Islam, and they're cheering as it's on as a tree there is on fire. They're cheering that. It's a you know, as Norman Finkelstein says, it's a lunatic alt-right state. It's gone absolutely crazy, and I don't know,
right-wing extremism. Like like it doesn't matter what religion the people that are perpetrating that are. That has nothing to do with anything. That is right-wing extremism, and we should call that out, no matter, you know, where you see it, no matter what religion, no matter what country, which is what I do. I know you do the same thing, Aaron, Ryan.